I'm pleased to say that the departure of 120,000 international troops is not brought about the security gap or the collapse that was often anticipated.
Afghani President Ashraf Ghani at the White House yesterday meeting with President Obama.
Yeah, out of the meeting came the president's decision to keep the current level of troops in Afghanistan steady rather than reduce them as previously planned.
Joining us now from Newsmax Washington, our Newsmax White House correspondent, John Gizzi. John, it is always good to have you here. I understand you were at that press briefing yesterday. Give us your impressions of what went on there.
Well, it's very clear that the president has a good relationship with President Ghani of Afghanistan, whom I might add speaks superb English. And he has clearly a much better relationship than he did with his predecessor, President Karzai. And they agree on the gradual withdrawal, the training of Afghanistan troops. All is cool between Washington and Kabul. Now, on the other hand, as is often the case, questions are posed by my colleagues in the press about subjects not germane to the visiting world leader. Sure enough, the first question on the American side of the East Room was about Benjamin Netanyahu, with whom the president reveals he has a business-like relationship. The president made it clear that he is not letting Prime Minister Netanyahu get away with his pre-election statement that he would not support a two-state agreement recognizing a Palestinian state, that he said, I believed it, and many people who voted in the election believed it. Very clearly, they're going to have to do more than have perfunctory calls after the election to heal the relationship between the two.
President Ghani seemed very, very, very grateful, even making a point of thanking the United States for all the money that we have sent over to Afghanistan. What were your thoughts on that?
Yes, he certainly did.
Mm-hmm. What were your thoughts on that?
And the other factor, well, the fact is that President Ghani, remember, is there after a very controversial and disputed election. And in his remarks and in the president's remarks, references were made to Abdullah, who came in second and now holds the title of chief executive. This was virtually insisted upon by Secretary of State Kerry to have a good relationship with the new regime in Kabul, but also to see that the political factions are brought together. They went along with that, the money keeps flowing, and again, the relationships are good between the two capitals at this point.
And President Ghani, in addition to speaking superb English and alluding to what Miranda talked about, not only thanking the United States, but specifically thanking the American taxpayer. Where did Ghani develop this sensitivity toward American sensitivities, John?
Oh, I know very easily, J.D. He developed it because he's an economist, number one, and he knows about tax dollars. And for many years, he worked in the United States, just down the street from the Newsmax studio, in fact, at the World Bank. So I think he knows a thing or two about where the money comes from and who is due a thanks for it.
How would that affect our relationship with Afghanistan? I know he lived here for a couple of decades, that he and his wife are very well educated and have lived in other countries as well. Do you think that will help U.S.-Afghani relations and help hopefully weed out some of these terror cells that are throughout the Middle East and Central Asia?
Okay, Miranda, no one can say what will happen with the terror cells. Who would have thought a week ago that ISIS would have had solidarity declared with it by Boko Haram in faraway Nigeria? The fact is that terrorism is going to go on through the world, and the war on terror, as much as the administration doesn't like to use the term, shows no signs of abating. In fact, an argument can be made it's growing. Now, that said, one thing is different. When President Karzai was in office, he was primarily geared toward pleasing various tribal factions in his country. He had not lived outside that country. He had a brother who was involved in some deeds that many Americans say were underhanded. This is not President Ghani by any stretch of the imagination. He speaks English. As you say, he and his wife are very educated, and he knows a little bit more about America, the American economy, and American politics. So yes, signs are strong. We will have a better relationship with him than we did under President Karzai. One of the worst kept secrets is that President Obama had a worse relationship with President Karzai than any other world leader except one.
And John, we're going to ask you to come back after this break and talk more about what we might do militarily.
I think it's important, Leo, to remember the timeline for a withdrawal down to a embassy-centered presence, a normalization of our presence in Afghanistan remains the end of 2016. So that hasn't changed. Our transition out of a combat role has not changed. Now, I am the first to say that as long as our men and women in uniform are serving in Afghanistan, there are risks involved. It's a dangerous place.
President Obama answering a question after he announced that he would delay the drawdown of American troops stationed in Afghanistan. Let's continue our conversation now with Newsmax White House correspondent John Gizzi, checking in from Newsmax Washington. So, John, the president went to great lengths to explain this, but in fact, isn't this decision a sea change of his evaluation and his goal in Afghanistan?
Well, it certainly is. The president, and this was a driving force in his winning the Democratic nomination, promised out of Afghanistan and made it very clear that was going to be a goal. Well, he's in his second term, and now he's saying we'll be down and out of a combat role in 2016. So I think he's irked a little bit of his party's left-of-center base. On the other hand, there are many on the center-right in Congress who say that it was a mistake in the first place to telegraph the exit from Afghanistan as to precisely when the last U.S. forces would leave. Even in Vietnam, when we were having the Vietnamization program, there was never any timetable for the public and the enemies to read about. So again, what does the president gain from this? One doesn't know, except one can only hope for an Afghanistan that's peaceful and can police itself.
John, let's switch gears and talk about what's happening up on Capitol Hill. Specifically, late yesterday, a key retirement announced in the United States Senate.
That's correct. And as my late colleague at the White House, Helen Thomas, used to say, the news never takes a vacation. On a day that we're focused on Afghanistan and the upcoming events in Nigeria, Senator Dan Coats of Indiana, Republican, announced he would not run for his fourth non-consecutive term next year. Dan Coats is someone I've known since he came in the House as a Reagan baby back in 1980 with 53 other freshman Republicans. When Dan Quayle moved on to be vice president, he assumed his Senate seat, won a full term, and then stepped down and yielded to the Democrat Evan Bayh. When Bayh retired at a very young age, after only 2 terms in the Senate, Senator Coats came back, having served a stint as ambassador to Germany. Now, Dan Coats is someone who's a conservative. On most issues, he's also a very thoughtful person. He was one of 7 people who did not sign Senator Cotton's letter to the Iranian leadership and refused any interviews. He does not want dissension within his colleagues. He's an old-school Republican, a gentleman, and I think at 71 he decided he'd served enough.
So who do you think will fill his shoes, so to speak?
Oh, Miranda, can you have me on for about John. 4 segments this morning?
Yeah,
You got 30 seconds, Gizzi.
I can tell
Give
you
us your
this.
top list.
You can do it.
I almost didn't make it this morning on time because I was following up on it, and you have at least 4 Republican members of the House who are eyeing it. Marlin Stutzman, one of those who wouldn't vote for Speaker Boehner's reelection, hardcore conservative. Todd Rokita, young congressman who came in 2010, former Secretary of State of Indiana and the father of its voter ID law that went all the way to the Supreme Court and was upheld, and by way of disclosure was my former intern 20 years ago, I think he's the only member of Congress who still insists on calling me Mr. Gizzi.
Well, Mr.
They
Gizzi,
both are actively exploring it. Several Democrats eyeing it, including the former Speaker of the House, John Gregg. But if I had to put my money, I'd say no Democrats will win in Hoosier country in
well, we'll see.
2016.
John Gizzi, we appreciate that update. He's wearing out that shoe leather to go with the hat to update us on Indiana. More ahead. Stay with us.